Howdy folks, welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory and today is Sunday, July the 30th, 2017, and I have the pleasure of welcoming to the show for the first time Mr. Trent Mell, President and CEO of First Cobalt. Mr. Mell is a mining executive and is a capital markets professional with extensive international transactional experience acquired through more than 200 transactions, including M&A and over $2.6 billion in equity and debt financings. After a career as a Bay Street lawyer, Trent worked for both global producers and junior miners. More recently, he built a securities team to advise issuers and investors on Canadian exploration and development opportunities, which became the largest provider of flow-through capital in Canada. Trent is chairman of the board for the Boost Child and Youth Advocacy Center. Trent previously served as president and head of mining at Pear Tree Securities, president and CEO of Falco Resources, as well as senior management positions with Areco Gold Incorporated, North American Palladium Limited, Sherritt International Corporation, Barrick Gold, Strikeman Elliott LLP, and Michelin North America. Trent has a BA, a BCI, and LL.B from McGill University, as well as an MBA from Northwestern University and Schulich School of Business, and LLM from Osgoode Hall. And First Cobalt trades on the Toronto Ventures Exchange under the symbol FCC and on the over-the-counter market under the symbol FTSSF. Trent, welcome to the Daily Coin.
Rory, thanks so much. A pleasure to be here.
Well, that's quite an extensive resume you've got working there. You've been a busy young man.
Yeah, I got to find time for golf.
Well, now that's the important part. And First Cobalt is on the verge of becoming the world's largest cobalt exploration company, having two really great cobalt projects on opposite sides of the world. I would think this would make your company much more attractive to some of the larger multinational companies that have projects in multiple locations. In addition to that, Trent, they recently proposed a three-way merger that will more than double your footprint in the historic Cobalt, Ontario mining camp. Explain the three-way merger and why this is significant and how it came about.
Sure. Thanks so much, Rory. So, I guess the backdrop to this is the true revolution that's going on in mobility with electric vehicles, and of course the underpinning to all of that is the lithium-ion batteries. And despite its name, there's a lot of metals that go into them: lithium, graphite, manganese, nickel, and of course cobalt. And cobalt's really come to the fore this year because the chemistry of the batteries is such that it's the go-to metal. There's as much cobalt in a lithium-ion battery today, the rechargeable batteries, as there is lithium, and on a dollar basis. So people started looking at the supply chain and saying, well, where is this going to come from? And the reality is today, almost 2/3 of the cobalt being produced is coming out of the Congo, the DRC. And it just, for reasons of geopolitical stability, people are trying to look elsewhere for supply. And there's not many places you can go to get a lot of cobalt. Often it's produced as a byproduct, as a secondary metal to copper and nickel mines. And in Canada, we've got a unique, very, very unique play on the planet. It's a camp that's produced historically a lot of silver, but also a fair amount of cobalt. But they weren't chasing cobalt when this was mined 75, 80 years ago. And we've gone back and we've reconceived this camp as a cobalt play, albeit with a lot of silver going to come with it. So the pairing is very unique, very attractive. And as we got into the camp a short while ago, we've been at this for 5 months, we came to appreciate the opportunity of really having a high-grade mining district. And we thought we got to consolidate the camp. So we started speaking with two other companies. We had like-minded visions, and we decided it was best for shareholders if we can do that consolidation. So bringing the three of us together, we've got about 45% of the camp now under our belt, and probably a dozen or so past mining operations on our footprint. So we're one of these little junior explorers. It's not just looking at a single mine, but a dozen or more mines and a whole bunch of prospects across 10,000 hectares of land in one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world to operate.
Now, you mentioned that cobalt is primarily a byproduct of copper and nickel mining. And with 95% of all cobalt produced globally as a byproduct, I mean, First Cobalt, it seems, is dedicated cobalt mine. I mean, this places your projects at the quote or, front of the line as far as your projects are not dependent upon the production of these other metals. And my guess is this will help First Cobalt tremendously and make your company more attractive to investors and production companies alike, as your cost should be somewhat lower for the mined cobalt. Or am I missing something there, Trent?
No, your point is bang on. That's actually a critical point, Rory. When you look at cobalt that's produced around the world, I mentioned, of course, the DRC, and so that's copper mines producing a lot of cobalt. But when you step out and you see where else it's produced, you're getting it in a lot of nickel operations throughout the world, throughout Australia and Cuba and parts of Canada. And if we take Canada as an example, Vale, one of the world's biggest miners, and even Glencore, they mine in Ontario in Canada in the Sudbury camp. But the cobalt they produce out of their mines there is the fifth payable metal. It's nickel and then copper and then platinum and then palladium. So you can imagine if that's the fifth most important metal, there's nothing that cobalt can do that's going to really drive their decisions to invest more or produce more. It's all going to be driven off the price of nickel and that market's consideration. So you turn to First Cobalt. There's a few juniors out there. We're going to be the largest by a factor of probably 3 or so on the exploration side. Never in the history of modern mining has anybody actually gone out looking for cobalt as a primary focus. It's one of those metals you kind of took it as it came. And yet, as a result of Tesla and Elon Musk's vision that's been adopted by every auto company on the planet, the demand for cobalt is coming. Well, actually, let's put it the other way. The supply that we produce as miners around the world, about half of that is going into electric vehicles today. And yet we've only got about a 1% global vehicle penetration rate that's electric. So as you start to look out, 10, 20, 30% penetration rates, we're going to need a heck of a lot more cobalt. And so our mission is to go out and find those next mines. I think we're giving ourselves about 5 years to identify open pit deposits and put them into production. And we've got a pretty good team that's got a lot of experience doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, your management team is a key factor, because I could go out and dig around in the dirt, but I'm probably not going to produce a whole lot. So unless I've got the right people around me, and from what I can tell, Trent, you're surrounded by a really top-notch team, and which is affording you this three-way merger and to be able to get into the mining operations that you're currently in. So I commend you on that. And I want to turn real quick, if you don't mind. I want to look at your flagship project, the Keeley Frontier Project in Silver Center, just outside of Cobalt, Ontario, Canada. And that appears to be a great project with lots of potential in both silver and cobalt, with a history of producing 3.3 million tons of cobalt and 19 million ounces of silver. That's a lot of silver. This area seems to be rich with the two in-demand minerals. How quickly will you be in a position to bring a new mine in production for that project?
So our vision, we probably kind of inch our way into it. So over the past, this mine, historically was Canada's first real mining rush. So our own kind of Klondike actually started in silver, not in gold. And so 1904 they made the discovery, and there were some 70 different mining operations from 1904 through to as late as the 1960s. But the real heyday for this camp was the 1920s. So in between the wars, the two great wars, and then it went into a period of decline. So the grades were spectacular, but what they were doing there, because they weren't looking for the cobalt, they had these high-grade silver veins that were very visible. It was white carbonate veins, and everything around it that was dark in color basically got mined and raised out of these small shafts and left as kind of waste piles throughout the camp. So over the next 18 months, I anticipate we're going to be able to process some of that and generate some early revenue. It'll be cobalt as well as some nickel and a bit of silver, and get ourselves into a cash flowing situation. The actual mine, kind of the bigger picture company making vision, is probably about a 5 year opportunity. We're going to start drilling here in about 2 weeks' time. Target rich. In addition to the dozen mines, we've got about 50 different known prospects and mineral showings across a pretty vast area. So to me, it's going to be, let's find the high grade cores, and there are some high grade cobalt sort of nerve centers across the camp. We want to focus on those. We want to identify the open pit, and we've got a very mature camp it's just ripe for opportunity.
I like it. I like the sound of that a lot. I like target-rich environments.
So do I, yes.
And what are you seeing, Trent, in the silver market that has you excited for First Cobalt and the Keeley Frontier project?
Yeah, so on the silver side, silver is it's a funny metal, right? At times it behaves like a precious metal, and at times it behaves more like an industrial. So it's one of those metals that it can be hard to predict. It's in my career historically, I spent a lot more time on the gold side than anything else, and gold, it's a precious metal, and full stop. Silver, as the economies around the world improve, I think it's got legs. It's got good opportunity to keep providing important cash flow. And as we sort of conceptually model out what we think we may be able to identify in the camp, our revenue streams we're predicting at this point would be split pretty evenly between silver and cobalt. And so for investors who like the precious metals component, I mean, it's a great pairing. Cobalt with copper and cobalt with nickel has a lot of different variabilities that come into play that can kind of hamper your production and development decisions. When you have silver, not only is it nice because it's got the precious and industrial underpinning, but also it's a great financing tool. So my shareholders don't have to get diluted if I can, or as much at least, in a development scenario, if I can stream or sell forward some of that future silver production. And what that does is it provides me a source of financing, a source of capital, and it just increases that exposure to cobalt, making us a more and more pure cobalt play, which is a very hard thing to find in the world.
Yes, that it is. And if you don't mind, Trent, I'd like to ask you a little bit bigger picture question regarding some of these large-scale infrastructure projects that are going on around the world. And you've mentioned cobalt and the importance of cobalt to the lithium-ion batteries, and you're going to be mining at least a small amount of nickel and copper and some of these more industrial metals. I mean, are you excited about these projects that are going on a global scale? Are you going to be able to, is your part of your goal is to be able to tap into those markets, or how do you see that impacting what you have going on at First Cobalt?
Well, I guess from an infrastructure side, we've already been approached by potential strategic partners out of Asia who are interested in investing in our company. And candidly, Rory, it's just too soon. I've been on the job now for 5 months. We've got a strong retail investor base with this transaction. We're going to start to get some of the bigger institutional investors involved. So it's way too early to actually partner, but we're all seeing the same thing. We're all seeing infrastructure by way of gigafactories, by way of this, as I mentioned, this revolution in electric vehicles. You had the UK, I think it was yesterday or the day before, announced that they were going to ban the sale of petrol vehicles and diesel and hybrids by 2040. So we're going down this path. And even though penetration rates are still low and electric vehicles are a bit of a novelty, every auto company on the planet has shifted their R&D away from diesel almost entirely and increasingly away from gas engines towards electric vehicles. So we're all going that way. There's going to be models by every manufacturer out within the next 5 years. And so when I look at not just the gigafactory that Elon Musk is building in the States, but the half dozen or more that are being built in China and others around the world, that kind of massive spend just tells you that this is not going away, that we're in it for a while. There may be some substitution of metals and changing chemistries through time, but you think of that kind of massive infrastructure investment, the R&D that goes into it, the supply chain that you've got to set up, the safety testing and certifications. I think the next 5 years are looking really, really bright for our commodity.
I would say I wasn't aware that China was building out that many gigafactories, but that says a lot right there. I mean, if they're making that type of an investment.
Yeah, I would say, Rory, for us here in North America, I don't think we get a true appreciation for just how significant this evolution or revolution is taking hold. You got to go to China to really appreciate that. It's mandated. You can't drive your car every day of the week if you've got a gas vehicle. You get an EV, then there are no restrictions. You can drive it Monday through Friday right into town. You're not stuck in a lottery system just to get a license. The pollution in cities like Beijing is truly a systemic crisis that's gone to the top levels, and that repeats itself in places like India and elsewhere around the world. Here in North America, where we've got more forests and more open space. So I think once you start to look at the bigger picture, you appreciate that a lot of the trends that have been maybe started in the States have quickly been adopted by countries overseas, and they may surpass us if we're not quicker on the development side.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I would say that they are going to pass us because they are making the necessary investments and pushing programs, in particular in China and India, with these gargantuan solar programs that they have going on over there. I mean, China by 2020, which is a short 2.5 years from now, plan on having 300 million homes interconnected through solar power. India has taken on the challenge and is doing the same thing, which ties into your silver projects, because without silver, you don't have solar, period. And that's
Correct.
because it can't be. They're trying to find some substitutes, like you mentioned a moment ago, as far as the different chemistry, the chemistry changing. So far, they've been trying for years and years. They haven't been able to figure that one out. Probably not going to. So yeah. That bodes well for silver. And last question, Trent. It appears the demand for cobalt and lithium-ion batteries, according to the charts on your websites, is growing by greater than 5% per annum, with demand nearly doubling over the next 6 years. We know the cobalt industry is running into trouble with finding new deposits and actually growing the market, which to me is incredibly bullish for you. I mean, do you foresee this type of scenario with cobalt, or how is the overall market of cobalt progressing? I mean, is it stable? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? I mean, what do you see over the course of the next 5 years?
Over the next 5 years, I think the miners are going to be busy. The reality is we've had a doubling in the price of cobalt, more than a doubling over the last 12 months. That's not a blip. I think that's gonna be sustainable, and we might see further room on the upside. So the problem we're in right now, not only is cobalt generally not a primary focus of miners, and it's a byproduct metal, but also since the great financial crisis, since 2008, effectively, miners haven't done a lot of exploring, and it's a cyclical business. The downtimes can be pretty rough, but when we don't do exploring, then our pipeline empties out, and you do need at least 4 to 8 years to build a new mine. So if you haven't done the exploration, it's pretty easy for us to look through our pipeline of new projects and predict this shortage that we're seeing today, continuing up until, in my view, 2023. So the deficit's there. Having said that, it's supply and demand, right? We're in a market economy. What that does is it incents people like myself. I quit my job, came to First Cobalt. I'm not even taking a salary because I believe in the vision. And I took equity in the company, and I'm going to be out there trying to fill that supply chain shortfall. And there'll be others that'll do it as well. Frankly, I really like where we are, and I like our odds. But people like myself, teams like ours, will go out and we'll fill it up. But it's going to take a few years. So I think there's a great investment thesis. As I said, over the next 5 years, there simply is not enough cobalt on the planet today to meet even the more modest projections on where electric vehicle markets may be headed. So we'll need a little bit of substitution. We'll probably do a bit of that. But us miners are going to be very, very busy and very incented to go out and find those next mines.
I like it. I like it a lot. It sounds, and I'm really glad to hear you say that you are heavily vested in your company, because I know that Keith Neumeyer, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's a big believer in that type of approach to the projects, because once you get vested fully with your wallet into your own project, well, there's an incentive for you.
Yeah, you're bang on. In fact, so I'm not taking a dime out of this company for at least a year and maybe 2. And my idea is I'm going to be fully aligned with shareholders. And so what we've done is we built out a team. We've got a management team. We all come from operating backgrounds. I was at Barrick, and we built, discovered, and operated assets. But then our board, we balanced it out with people who have done that as well, and layered in guys like Paul Matisik and Bob Cross, who are known by investors as being very, very good sellers. So that if the opportunity ever comes for us to have a good win for our investors, we're not going to entrench ourselves and look for a payday for ourselves. We'll look for a big payout for our shareholders. And you got to balance that out. Be able and ready to build, but also be in a position to sell if a major comes along and likes what you've done.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you are aligned with your shareholders, I mean, I would think that just that in itself puts you in a different category than most all the other mines that are not doing that because you're going to be seen as, like we were just discussing, you are aligned with the company. You are fully vested in what's happening. That speaks in volume, in my opinion. It's huge. It's a huge deal.
Thank you very much. I know we're coming to an end here. I should point out that as a result of this three-way merger, it's going to take us 2 or 3 months to close the transaction because it's Australia and North American issuers. So our stock is currently halted, probably another 2 weeks before we start trading again. So we're getting to the end of the regulator's review, and we'll come off the halt, start trading again in probably 2 weeks' time.
Okay, that's an important piece of information, and thank you for that. And we've been speaking with Mr. Trent Mell. He is the president and CEO of First Cobalt, and you can find First Cobalt at firstcobalt.com, and you can find their stock on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol FCC, and on the over-the-counter market under the symbol FTSSF. Trent, thank you for all your time this morning.
Thank you. Real pleasure, Rory. Have a great day.
You too.